Nurah Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nurah Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nurah Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nurah Speaks podcast, and I'm your host, Nurah Muhammad. I am so excited to be joined in this episode by a beautiful and wonderful sister doing great work, Sister Colette Muhammad. Welcome to the program.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Wa alaikum salam, sister. I am excited and I'm eager for what you're going to share with the audience. You know, it's necessary, it's essential. And I've been watching you and the work that you've been doing for a while. I've been seeing you on social media and what you're going to share with the audience today about food and food preparation, food preservation specifically is so important. And it really reminds me of being a little girl watching my own grandmother in the kitchen preserving and canning food. And so I'm excited. But before we get into that part, let's tell the audience a bit about your background.
Okay, so what I typically like to share with people is how I got into canning. Okay, so I am a registered member of the Nation of Islam, and the sisters in the nation are referred to as MGT, and that stands for Muslim Girls in Training. And so in our class, we have 7 units, and those units are how to keep house, how to rear our children, how to take care of our husbands, sew, cook, and in general, how to act at home and abroad. And so I would say probably around 2017 or so, we were in our cooking curriculum. And so the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is the head of our sisters class. And at that time, while we were in that curriculum, he gave instructions for us to learn the skill of canning. And yes, and then as for me, I had not canned before. Okay. So I had always wanted to can. And, I would see some of the seasoned sisters that already knew how to can, or some of our older sisters, or not even older, just people who know how to do it. And so it always fascinated me. But I had always thought that ship had kind of passed me by. And so when that came up, I was so excited about it. And so that is basically how I initially got into the canning. What was I going to say? So we started that, like I said, I want to say about 2018, and it was a very rigorous class, very extensive. Okay. We really got into learning food spoilage versus food preservation. We learned about, the types of food as far as where they fall on the acidity chart. Um, what type of food spoilage happens to what type of food. So you have things like yeast and mold that develop on high acid foods, and you have things like bacteria that develop on your low acid food items. And so, yeah, that was very intense. And we had to really pass. We got tested on everything that we were taught. So we had health food safety, we had kitchen safety that we had to pass. They wanted to make sure that no one was going to injure themselves and really knew their way around the kitchen. So we had to learn stove safety. We had to learn I think we even had to learn how to use your what is it, the fire hydrant thing in case there was a fire. We had to learn about that. So it was very intense. And so after we learned that skill, then the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan took it a step further. And to even pass, we had to produce a certain amount of jars to move on to the next part of that class. So I believe it was like 30 jars of a food item we had to produce in the water bath canning. And then after we produced that, then we were able to move on into the pressure canning. So that is the background on how I actually even got into it. So I was not someone that's been canning for 10 plus years or anything like that. It's pretty new to me.
That's incredible. So, as you're talking about food safety, the acidity. I think that most people don't consider that there is such a thing as food science. Like, for example, baking is chemistry. And so I think we don't talk about that in our general culture. Most of us don't understand the field.
Yes,
So I'm
yes,
excited to hear you talk about all of that, plus kitchen safety. Some of us just haven't learned, the proper handling of devices, how
yes.
to make sure we have safety equipment in our kitchen, like fire extinguishers and all of that. So I'm interested in hearing and learning how it is that you are doing what you're doing, and what's inspiring you, what's motivating you to share this. And I guess, just backing up, being a member of the MGT class, I am too, and I'm so grateful. I've
Yes.
learned so much in that class that I'm able to share with other sisters. It's just an incredible class to be a part of.
Yes, the units are invaluable. They are invaluable. And, we're taught that, we're being prepared for positions awaiting us. And so if you just be obedient to your units, Allah will just reveal what
Right.
those things will be one way or another. We all have something.
Yes, you're so right. So, I just want to take a step back. Each of us, those of us in the MGT and GCC class, our Saturday mornings are locked down. There's nothing that's happening except for our class. And it's just really, in general, a part of the culture of the Nation of Islam. I came when I was 18 years old, right out of high school, attending the classes. And one thing that it reminded me of was home economics. What I learned in high
Yes.
school, what I learned in being raised and watching my grandmother in the kitchen, watching my aunt sewing, and all of that. The class is so important for young Black women.
Yes.
It's important that we have elder women who are a part of that class, helps us to be successful at home and abroad. And it really also shows us how we can earn income without leaving our home, which is our foundation, it's our base. And it is such an important key for our success in general, right? And I find that many young women are missing that. There's something that I like to describe as the gap generation, where we have women who are now in their 40s, but they weren't raised by mothers to teach them those essential things about life, things about dressing and our appearance, what we're doing in a home and in the kitchen.
Yes.
So, a lot of this has not been passed down, and somebody has to fill the gap. And I'm grateful that we have that beautiful class that is doing just that.
Yes. Yes. It's all of that plus the sisterhood. So you can't beat
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
It's all of that wrapped in a sisterhood. So and that's even, like you said, that's even a missing art. That is a missing necessity, in our community. Like you talked about with women, just that alone being a base.
Right.
Is key.
Absolutely. I just imagine those who are listening walking into a room and every sister there just loves you to death.
Right.
When I came into the class, I was 18, and there were, a lot of sisters there who were much older than me. And at 18, I didn't know much about life. But one thing I will know is that these women looked after me in a way that I know that my family, my aunts, my grandmother, my mother would be happy that I had a group of women that was nurturing me and still guiding me into womanhood, and for anyone who's interested in the MGT and GCC class, GCC stands for General Civilization class. I would encourage you to contact the Muhammad's Temple or Muhammad's Mosque in your area so that you can learn more about how you can get to be a part of that class. And, Sister Colette, quite honestly, we can do an entire episode of Nurah Speaks just talking about how incredibly invaluable that class is. It's really amazing. Absolutely.
How invaluable it is. That is a fact. And, we learned so much. There have been things in there that we have learned that people pay good money to learn. And we are granted and blessed to have that class at our fingertips,
That's right.
I think after that, we had a rigorous, intense sewing class where we would learn to literally build and, sew a garment from scratch, pants
Right.
and a garment, a hat and a headpiece that you can wear and be proud of, that was
That's right.
made to excellence, you know?
Mm,
Excellence.
that's right.
You couldn't even move on. It doesn't allow you to move on. Like, they want only the best for us. So there was no, oh, let it slide. Oh, it's okay. It'll be okay. I know my lieutenant. That's how my lieutenant, I don't know about any other cities, but my lieutenant, I'm sorry, sis, we're going to have to start that over again.
That's right. Get the seam ripper. Get the seam ripper. Start over.
But people, it's invaluable. People are out there. What we have to offer is invaluable, and there are people that do pay good money for what we offer. So
That's right.
the value, and for us to be able to get these things for free on a weekly basis, that are
Right.
cultivating and growing us and to benefit us, our family, and our community abroad. So it's not just for us. When we say do for self, it's for self, family, community.
That's right. That's right. And in general, helping us to become, self-reliant, independent. So let me just pause and share something with you, the listeners, that is. So I'm interviewing Sister Colette. She's in her kitchen with her apron on, and in the middle of our conversation, my sister stands up from the table and and she opens her oven and takes out a cake because apparently her cake is done. I love this. I love this. You're in the kitchen. You were talking about canning. This is real life. This is not fake. This is not phony. You still have a whole entire, life going on, and you're baking. So I just love that.
I meant to tell you that in the beginning. I'm like, oh no, I heard the oven maker sound. Like, oh my God, I forgot I had a cake in the oven.
Listen, this is real life. This is real life.
Stop.
I love it.
MGT.
Hey, we're MGT all the time. It does not stop. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I love it. So we got the cake out of the oven. The cake is done. Wonderful. Now, Sister Colette, just about the canning, folks use the terms canning and they use the term jarring. They use them generally interchangeably. So for those who may be new, is there a difference? Can you explain that to us?
Yes, it is. And so they really mean the same thing. Okay. So I will literally say canning and jarring in one sentence. Okay. They're interchangeable, they are synonymous. I kind of feel like, originally, like when you talked about our grandmothers and things like that jarred their food, right? And so that was the term, jarring your food. But then when we get into when, big industries got involved, what did they do? They started to can the food, okay, at a, lower value. So then we start using that word canning. So, they're interchangeable. So that's all. They mean the same exact thing. A lot of people, that's usually the first question I get when people are first interested.
Okay. So canning, jarring, that's food preservation, right? So
yes,
let's
ma'am.
start at the beginning. Why is it important that we preserve our food in this way?
Okay, so in this way, we're talking about a method that we can use to get our food to last us for an extended period of time. Okay, because sometimes we would love to buy things in bulk. Maybe we're at the grocery store and something's on sale, 50 cents a pound, and it's just like, well, what would I do with all these oranges? What would I do with all these tomatoes? Or maybe we're at the local farmers market and they've got what have you on sale, green beans, 10 cents a pound, And so what happens is this method allows you to preserve your food for an extended period of time. Okay. And so when I say extended, we're talking about a minimum of 1 year, maybe even perhaps longer. But we know that we can get to a good solid year if it's properly preserved. Okay. And what's happening when we use our canning methods, and there are two methods. What we're doing is we're placing our food in a jar, and it's in an environment, excuse me, that heats up to a certain temperature that kills off the bacteria.
Okay, so there's two different methods of canning and jarring. Explain the difference between the two, and is one better than the other?
So there's two methods. We have the water bath method, And for if you were able to see me, you would be able to see this big water bath canner. Big, huge pot, basically, is what it is. And then we have the pressure canner. Okay, that's also typically a really big pot, but it has a mechanism that allows food to be sealed. Okay, so now the difference is depending on what the food item is that you're going to be preserving. So we have two types of food. We have food that falls on our pH acidity chart that are high acid foods. And then we have low acid foods. I kind of mentioned that earlier. So a high acid food would typically be things like your fruits, your high citrus foods, jellies, sometimes tomatoes, sauces, things like that. If you think about your fruits, you can think like a lemon, they have high acid, okay? So when those items are starting to spoil, they typically develop molds and yeast, okay? So we can usually, well, not usually, the proper way of killing off that mold and yeast is to water bath, because that allows the temperature inside this big pot to get up to 212 degrees Fahrenheit. And that is a safe temperature to kill off those molds and those microorganisms that would be unsafe for you. Okay. So the pressure canning method would be typically for foods that are low acid. Those are things like your vegetables, green beans, potatoes, even meats. So if you think about a carrot, it's not very acidic, it's kind of a low, you think of a bean soup, low acidity. Okay, so that's prone to bacteria. So we've got to get the heat up to 240 degrees. And this method is the only method that will allow that to happen. So you could never preserve your food using the jarring method in a water bath canner. If you were to try it, like it would take you probably 24 hours, for something that would typically take maybe 2 hours in a pressure canner. And even then, it's just not recommended, okay? Because you just cannot get the heat up to where it needs to be at a safe temperature to kill off the bacteria that develops on low acid foods. So that is the reason for the difference.
Okay. Well, for someone who would say, why would I go through all of that when I can just buy my food at the supermarket already in cans and jars? What is the benefit here?
Many, many reasons why. And that is a perfect question. Okay. So here's a few. Financial savings. Okay. So you know how I mentioned earlier about, things to sometimes go on sale. Green beans are 10 cents a pound. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe they're 10 cents a pound. What would I do with it? So things like that. That's a benefit of canning. You're able to take advantage of, getting your food on sale, getting it in bulk. You're able to prepare your food in a healthy manner. You can know exactly what's in your jars. Okay, that is a big one right there. You know exactly what's in it. You buy tomato sauce and you look on the back of it and you got to look for the word tomato. So
right.
That's
right. That's right.
I mean? And typically that's how most things are. It's like you might find it somewhere in the middle.
Right. It's like you got to be a chemist to understand.
Exactly. But so here is a jarred bean soup. I can pretty much see all the ingredients that are in there, right? So, well, yeah, this is a podcast, but so that's how it is. You can see through these jars. So they're not like a can that has a picture of what is supposed to be in there, and then when you open the can, there's nothing like the picture.
Right,
so
right.
You can't fool anybody with the jars, okay? Convenience, okay? So you have good, fresh, wholesome food available. Right. So it's kind of like fast food at your fingertips in your home that you can store, that you can eat, not only in emergency, but that is another benefit. But say you're having a long day. Someone like me, I've been tapping into my stash way too much. But we have long days, maybe we're homeschooling, maybe we were out most of the day. And so it's an easy way to be able to just kind of reach into your storage and pull out some green beans, some bean soup, some potatoes or whatever you already have jarred up. Right. And another benefit to that is, it's already prepared. It's actually already cooked. Right. So what the process of preserving food, with these methods, is it also cooks the food for you. So it's cooking the food, processing it, and killing off anything that could harm you. Okay. And so when we talk about another benefit, which is very big, and this is another thing I was going to touch on, Minister Farrakhan has been driving this into the sisters week after week after week to can and continue to can and to continue to can until you can't anymore. Okay. Because, and he prepared us for this, like I said, back in 2016, 2017. Okay. So we have a divine leader in our midst, okay, that is helping us, preparing us for what is down the road. Okay. We can look around us and we see what we're in.
Right.
Okay. And so the benefit is that, he's telling us not only to learn this skill, but he's also telling us to store up a minimum of 3 months worth of food in our homes. Okay. So that is what the divine instruction has been from Minister Farrakhan for quite a while now. Yeah. Okay. And so it's preparing us for what we're in today.
Right.
So that's a big benefit,
Right. So you're talking specifically, we're in this pandemic. There's an economic downturn in this country. And this is great advice. And this is something that we've been talking about in the Nation of Islam for decades, in discussing having a survival kit. And part of that is storing and jarring our food. And so, how many times have we heard a financial advisor talk about, 3, 6 to 8 months, 9 months worth of savings in case of an emergency? Make sure that you have, or we have, those emergency funds available, right? But we don't hear many folks talking about storing food and being prepared. And even at times when we see these weather alerts that are coming, everybody runs out, they're buying out the store shelves. If there's a potential hint of a national weather emergency, we can't find any things in the store. But if we already have it stored in our homes, like you're describing, then we don't have to deal with insecurity. And that's what we see in so many families and so many households, this insecurity. And when people are insecure, they become dangerous.
Exactly. Can I say something? You touched on something about, how people are, usually we're taught, have the savings, financial savings. So for anyone that's listening, if you go to my Instagram page, it's at Sister Colette. I have a clip on there from something that I seen a couple weeks ago on the Today Show. So for any of us that are familiar with, her name is Susie Orman. She's like a financial counselor. Yeah. And, she comes on shows and platforms, and she's very well known. And usually that's her main thing. We got to save. We got to save for a rainy day. We need to invest.
That's right.
Save. We need to invest. We need to save. Right. We need to invest. That's her thing. That's who she is.
Right.
So she was on a couple weeks ago, and the question was asked to her, there's talk about this $600 stimulus check coming. What kind of advice would you give to people? And so she says, well, and I'm just paraphrasing, this is going to kind of sound crazy to you, but if you are one of those people who really doesn't have much saved up and you're kind of going through hard times or whatever, you need to take that money and go get canned food. And I'm not playing. Wow. And that's just how she said it. And I'm not playing.
Right.
And I looked and I was like, did she just say canned food?
Look at that.
And then she went in further to explain, that's because if you can't hardly pay a bill, then clearly food is an issue, or it's going to be an issue. Okay. Right. And so I seen that and I said, now look at this. They're just catching up like always, but we have already been given this divine information. And, when I present that information, it's not me trying to say, hey, they agree with us. It's not that. It's just for me to show they're just catching up, and that we've already been given this instruction.
That's right. That's right.
And to prepare for this, okay? And so there, Susie come lately. Teach. However, we've already been given divine guidance, okay, from our leader, the Honorable Mr. Louis Farrakhan. So I like how you mentioned that.
Well, don't forget, Sister Colette, some of our folks need it in black and white.
They do.
Right? So sometimes we need to hear what other people have to say, hear what the mainstream has to say. And then if we hear the mainstream, say, oh, okay, well, we'll do what Minister Farrakhan says.
Right.
You know how our people can be.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, we used to pick peaches and my grandmother used to preserve peaches and we would have peaches, all year round, right? But summertime was time for peaches. And I'm wondering, do you think that there are ideal times for canning specific foods? You talked about the farmer's market and, being able to get string beans for 10 cents a pound. Just grab them and can them so that you'll have them for, the seasons to come. So do you think about, when you're teaching these classes or canning for yourself, do you think about making sure you're grabbing things that are in season now so that you can have them during the off season?
So yeah, so what I do, I'm a big farmers market type of person. I love the farmers market because you just get great deals. So the thing is, if you are a person that does visit the farmers market, they're gonna, what they have is what's in season. Okay, so you don't really have to do too much guesswork. So what is there is your key of what I need to be using and preserving. Okay, so if you don't see it at the farmer's market, then it's not in season where you live. Okay, so you could go to your grocery store and you may be able to get strawberries because they're shipping them from wherever, or they're rapidly growing them by some other means that's other than natural. So that's why I really love the farmers market, because you're really getting things that are properly in season. Right. That's your time to go ahead and start preserving whatever is available. And that's another benefit, because then you're able to eat out of season foods throughout the year. Yes. Okay, so that's a great benefit of preserving food as well.
Right. So I'm in Jersey, and I haven't had a Jersey tomato better than a Jersey tomato, or a peach better than a Jersey peach. Georgians may say otherwise. But the things that we get, the produce anyway, that we get from the supermarket is such an inferior quality, like you said, than the produce that we get from the farmer's market.
Right.
And another benefit of the farmer's market is that we're supporting our local economy.
Exactly. Which is a big thing. We have to support our local farmers, because they're growing our food. I mean, I'm not a farmer. I don't have a garden that's, on my to-do list. So I really depend on them, and I respect what they do,
Right. So if someone is, they're really interested, they're listening to this conversation, they're very interested, and they don't have the equipment, and they say, I really want to get started. I like this idea of canning. I don't know where to start. How do you advise somebody to get going with this?
Okay, so everybody's finances are different, but what I will say is the great thing about getting started is these things last almost forever. Okay, so you're going to want to start investing in your canners, either your water bath canner or your pressure canner. So you could start with your water bath canner, especially if you're new, because it's a little bit easier skill to learn. It usually runs, when it's a regular price, you might be able to get one for about $35. The pressure canners, they fluctuate with price a bit. And then we could talk a little bit later about the scarcity of canning supplies. But these can run maybe $125, almost up to $200. They should be about $125, no more than $150. But we are in an epidemic, and the prices have been crazy. So you're going to definitely invest in your pots, your canning pots. You're also going to invest in what's called your canning utensils. So typically the canning utensils can be purchased as a set, and they will come with a few items, maybe about 5 items. You're going to need a funnel. You're going to need a jar lifter. You're going to need a headspace ruler. You're going to need a lid lifter. And these items are very sturdy. Once you buy them, you have them. Typically, if it's at the regular price, you could probably get one. They run from about $17 to $25. Okay. And once you have it, you have it. And then last, you will be needing to invest in your jars. Okay. So our jars come in different sizes. We have like half pints, we have quart sizes. That would depend on what it is you're jarring. So, if you have maybe a household of quite a few people, you probably wouldn't want to do a whole bunch of, pint-sized bean soups. You might want to go ahead and do some quart-sized bean soup, depending on what you're doing. Then again, if you're making strawberry jelly, you probably wouldn't want to do a quart size of strawberry jelly. You probably want to do some little pints or maybe a half pints even, you know? So that's really the only difference between the jars. So you're going to invest in your canner, you're going to invest in your canning utensils, and then you're going to invest in your jars. Okay. The jars typically come, like if you're buying the pint size, they usually come about 12 in a pack. When they are the regular price, they are usually between $9 or $12. They have gotten up to, that I've seen, $39.99 for pint size jars. Okay.
And you're talking about the 9 or 12 pack, that many jars.
So if the pint size jars come 12 in a pack.
Okay.
Usually between $9 to $12. And like I said, I seen from my own eyes, they got up to $39.99 for a pack of 12 pint size jars. It was crazy. And then that was even still if you could find them. So even right now, as we speak, we are back in a shortage again. So jars are where I'm at. I'm in New York State. They are very hard to find. The lids and bands that go to the jars are a bit difficult to find. So that is a bit of a struggle. But what has happened is, I did a little research and, these people know what we're in. Yes. So there are two different types of people. There are people that have already been jarring. They jar every year. And so seeing what's happening, they have doubled, tripled up. So right. That's happening. Then you have other people that never jarred before and are seeing what's happening. And now they're trying to jar. So the industry is being hit from both ends. And so that is where this extreme shortage has come from.
Okay. I thank you for sharing that. I would encourage listeners who are taking this in and they're encouraged, but having trouble finding the equipment, or if the equipment is beyond your means at this time because they're being overpriced, I would encourage you not to give up. Just keep an eye out for things as you see them, collect them gradually, because like you described, you may pay $150 for the pot, but it's an initial investment in something you can have forever.
Yes, ma'am. And I'm glad you said that. That is what I do now. So typically I go out about once a week, do my little errands or grocery shopping, and I'm looking for jars. And if I can find a pack, I just pick it up. Whether I'm jarring that day or week or whatever, just get it, because that's just what we're in right now. So it's worth it to just buy the jars as you see them. If you're someone that already is jarring, continue to do that, because I'm at that point now where I'm having a little bit of difficulty, but I'm not going to let it discourage me, because it will level off eventually. A lot of times what also happens is if we're in canning season, so depending on where you live, there may be a big canning season going on. Right. So you got canning season, you got people that already can and they're tripling up, and then you got new canners. So it's a lot going on there.
Right. Okay. So in terms of your classes, and I'll tell you, I have watched your videos that you put online, and you are such a teacher, and you just seem to be just naturally a teacher. And I've seen that you do homeschooling. So, it just seems to come so natural.
I do. I homeschool my grandchildren.
Okay. And that's something else we could talk about is how youthful you appear. But, we know that, eating well, thinking well, and doing well, we just learn to take care of ourselves. And, regarding you as a teacher, you have such a great spirit, even in this conversation, your energy and the spirit that you have and that you're sharing with this audience, it's beautiful and it's warming and endearing. And, I'm curious about how has this been going for you?
Oh, sis, it's been I'm a baby in this, So real briefly, so how I got into it, pandemic. Okay. And just, I was kind of going through a time where I was just like, wow, we always hear do for self. Right. That is just something, as a believer, that never goes away.
Never.
And if you're not active, if you haven't satisfied that do for self, whatever that is for you, it never goes away. It is constantly nagging you. So I have been following Brother Ben X, our great Brother Ben X, for a while. Every now and then he come through on my feed, and I'm just like, oh, what he up to? He's just, I love him. Okay. So I I noticed he started posting little things, little entrepreneurs things. He started doing more things with business and stuff like that. And I'm just like, I was really kind of going through a time where I'm just like, wow, what can I do for income? Like, second income, something, for self.
Right.
Um, but anyway, so eventually he has he has a lot of products, but he has something called digital real estate, and in particular something called ABS Tribe. It stands for Assets Before Splurging. It's basically a support group for entrepreneurs. So they give guidance, they do mentorship. It is invaluable what that program offers. And we meet about 3 times a week on there. Zoom. Sometimes there's like 100 of us on Zoom, but it's very interactive. The spirit is high.
Nice.
It is like a little bit of touch of heaven because everyone on there is like-minded. Mm-hmm. Everybody really wants for themselves what they want for their sister, vice versa. So I joined that in maybe August, probably September. And not having a product, not knowing what I wanted to do or what I could do, but just like there's something there, And so when I signed up, there was a sister that reached out to me and she just asked me a few questions. She was just like, so do you have a product or anything? I'm just like, no, I don't have a product or anything. And she's like, it's fine, it's fine. She was like, I want you to think about like, what do you do? Like, what are some things that you do already,
right,
naturally, that you would do anyway, that you're doing anyway? And I remember saying to her, I said, well, I homeschool and I can, I like to can, and I remember when I said it, I was almost kind of embarrassed to say it, like, this is nothing,
right.
But I'll say it because she asked the question. So I said it and that was that. And so never really touched on it anymore. And just, signing in with Brother Ben X and the support groups, he started teaching on, when you're coming into business, you have to come in and get your mind on the aspect of serving and impact and value.
Right.
And, not so much on what can I sell somebody or what kind of product can I come up with. I didn't get that at first. I was just like, what does that mean? And just, just continuing to be obedient and just, listen to other people's testimonies on how that works. I started to give it a try. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll, get an Instagram account. Never had an Instagram account until September. So I got an Instagram account and he was like, you got to put things on there of value that, give, just give.
Right.
Keep giving, and then it's going to figure out a way to come back to you.
Right.
So I was like, okay, try this. So I opened up an account, posting just a couple things, maybe a few pictures of my grandchildren or, I don't know, maybe me canning something. Didn't think anything of it. So one day we were on a call, it was pretty late, and Brother Yankan the Don was the speaker at that time. And if you ever come across him, he's very passionate, he's very animated, he's very spirited, high spirit brother. And so he was asking those of us who have never done a live on Instagram, why haven't you? And so when he got to me, and I was just like, I don't know, like, what would I even say? So he was just like, well, I'm challenging you when we get off this Zoom for you to do a live, okay?
Right.
And the title is gonna be why I haven't done it live. So I was like, sure. So that happens a lot. We get challenged a lot in that group. So the meeting was over, and I'm just like, oh wow. Now I happened to be canning all day. I was canning as the meeting was going on. I had started canning like about 10 o'clock that morning, and it was almost 11 when I got off the call. And it was steamy, and I had been canning. And so I had a little apron on and everything. And so I'm like, all right, let me figure out how to do a live. First time ever doing it. So I had the camera, and I'm just like, okay, so my name is Sister Colette, and I'm in my kitchen. I've been canning all day. And it's kind of hot, and I don't know what else to say. So that was kind of it, Then I went ahead and posted it, and I started getting like feedback from people kind of just asking questions like, oh, I always wanted to learn how to can, or how did you do that? Or, oh, you should teach canning. And I was like, teach canning? I mean, I don't know about that. And so then I took a class with one of our sisters, Deidre Bake. She does a baking class. And took her class, and they were asking me about it. The people in the class were asking me about the canning. So when are you gonna start that canning class? And I'm like, I don't know. I kind of been thinking about it. And they're like, well, what are you waiting on? I'm like, really? You think I should do it? So
Wow.
that is the history. I didn't mean to ramble, but that is like how it kind of started. So I just was like listening to Brother Ben, as far as giving value, serving, figure out something that people need, something that can benefit people, something that could save a life, something that you're doing already that you already know about. Before I knew it, people were inviting me on the different platforms to speak on their lives or their platforms. And I'm just like, what is happening? So I'm like, maybe I need a flyer, next thing I know, I'm like, maybe I need a website, so that is kind of how it just started to develop. Just first being someone that is just giving some type of value,
Yes.
But being genuine and about it, and really putting the urgency, because I really want our people to know this. Like my goal is I want specifically, our people in particular of brown and Black descent to dismiss the stigma that could be attached to canning.
Right.
Because I think a lot of times, sometimes I know I did, sometimes you think of canning, when you look at the visuals, you see people that don't look like us in this fabulous kitchen, and they've got, everything, every gadget that you could think of. And oh my God, today we're going to be canning. And, so you kind of think that that's something that other people do, or something that my grandmother did,
Right.
So I want to kind of dismiss that. I want to make it relatable. I want to get rid of anxiety and fear, because I hear a lot of people are very hesitant. They'll send me a little inbox. I want to try it, but I'm so scared. One thing that I'm noticing is that when people have been taking my class, one thing that they say when they come away is that, oh my God, I feel so much better and I have so much more confidence, since taking your class, and that makes me feel wonderful. So it feeds me energy, and it's a win-win because I'm canning. So either way, I'm canning.
Right.
So it's like I can't just, I don't just talk about it. I literally do it. So, we talk about it. I go into, the basics of canning, what canning is, kind of like a little bit we did earlier. Then, we get right into a recipe. I walk them through the recipe. I do it with them. Then we walk through the whole process of canning, right? All the way to the end of taking it out and placing it on your counter and letting it sit. So I love it. I got into it, and, inshallah, I'm going to continue.
Wonderful. Now, how long is the class, and is it dependent on what you're canning? And this really sounds more like a workshop than a class.
Yeah, but what I'm noticing, so I do like a two-day workshop. So, well, like for instance, it would be one Saturday, and then you come back the next Saturday. So what I'm noticing now is that, well, not now. What I'm noticing is that the first day typically takes 3 to 4 hours, and what that is, it's not so much that the food item takes so long, but I really want people to feel comfortable. So, I really want us to get into relax mode. And then, I really try to get into, because it's a crash course, really. So, so I kind of, really try to get into explaining the difference between the two. I talk about, food spoilers. So I do give, a little canning class, It's a workshop. Yeah, it's a workshop. Yeah, it's a workshop. So we get into that, and that part takes probably about 45 minutes. Then we get into the actual recipe. So that takes a little bit of time. Then we get into the actual processing of the jar. So it runs from 3.5 to 4 hours for the first one. The second class, when I have them come back, is a little bit shorter. I do a recap. I don't do everything all over, but, just recap, and then we get into whatever the recipe is. And then, so that class might be 2 to 3 hours, maybe about 2. But I purposely, I recommend the workshop for someone that's new or really, really needs a refresher, because my goal is I don't want it to just be a project, something that you just signed up for and just did. I want to make you come back again so that you can really feel what it feels like to can each week, or on a, I want them to feel it, like, okay, we're back again, we're canning again, so that's kind of why I recommend the 2-day.
Wonderful. So I really enjoyed your origin story. It's wonderful. Plus, the story is incredible. Plus, the audience got business advice, and I like that guidance that you got, because there is something in our repertoire for most of us. There's something that we know, something we can do that other people need to know. And what you're doing and what you have to offer in terms of providing a service improves our communities, right? And it helps others become more self-reliant, and we can take advantage of what we know to help our people. But this is not us, being exploitative or using the capitalistic system and replacing the current actors with us acting as exploiters of our people, or people who in general have need. And so you're giving services to someone for a fair price, right? And if they were going to a county college or the local high school, it's something that they would pay for. But here we come out of the MGT and GCC class, we learn so much that's valuable, and we're able to take it and earn income and share it with our people. So,
Yes,
and it's exactly what you've done, but you've done it with such energy and such love and such affirmation for the people, your students who are coming into your class. And I just think that is so, so wonderful.
Praise you so much. Beautiful. Yes, man. We were promised, good homes, luxury, and all walks of life. But what does that mean? It's just how you view it. Does it have to be a mansion? It could be. Or does it just mean peace of mind? So this,
That's right. And we see these phrases like do for self, and it will be rhetoric if we don't take the words that we're actually saying and give them life and do what we say that we should do and what others should do. And so here, you have a skill, you have the ability to share it with others, you're helping yourself, you're helping your kind. And this is doing for self. Some folks are doing it with a brick and mortar store, with the brick and mortar overhead, but it doesn't always have to be that way, but we're still helping and supporting, enriching the lives of our families and of those who are in our community.
Yeah, that's my goal. I can't wait till I'm in a position to, visit people's homes and really kind of hold hands with them, because some people are really nervous. I was nervous in the class with the person standing right next to me. So I that's real, so I don't want to dismiss that there are some reservations people have about this.
Right,
It's
right.
foreign. It's not the norm anymore, and so I can't wait to be able to do what you said, where I can come to people's homes
Right.
and maybe do parties, canning parties, invite your friends, we're canning jelly today, So yeah. And so the things that we normally prepare are, fun foods like jellies and salsa. We can't survive off jelly and salsa. But what I'm trying to do is just get people comfortable with the idea, and comfortable with the skill. And then from there, we got to get into the real. But let's just get comfortable with this. Let's make something fun and enjoyable. So that's my goal right now.
Yeah, you're giving people a start. So when they've completed your class, they're independent, and you're taking them through the steps, and now they can go and they can share it with others, and now be a student to be a teacher to the next student.
Yes, and I feel amazing because a lot of times they've gone out and they've sent me pictures of this new thing that they did, and they're so proud of it, and I'm so proud of them, and they're just amazing to be able to have some type of impact on another human, so that's like invaluable. So
Yes.
when that happened to me for the
Yes.
first time, that was when I knew, like, okay, I'm doing something, like making an impact. So all praise is due to Allah.
Indeed, and you're doing something that is so, so meaningful, man. This is wonderful. I really, really enjoy this conversation, and I know you have a schedule coming up for February classes. So give us some insight in that.
Yeah, let me get my little note here. I couldn't. Yeah, so in February, if you go to my website, it is www.kitchensplendor.co. So Splendor is spelled SPLENDOR.co. So if you visit my website, you will see that I've uploaded the classes for February. And so for February, what I have now is I have Thursday classes and Saturday classes, because because there are people that, they're not available on the weekend, or they're not available on the weekdays. So I have Thursdays, February 4th and 11th. That's the workshop. It's a 2-day workshop. And for that class, we'll be doing applesauce the first week, and then the second week we'll be doing jelly, probably your choice of apple or grape jelly. Then on Saturday, that's at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then on the Saturday classes, that will be February 13th and 20th, the 2-day workshop at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And that will be making salsa on the first day and then strawberry jelly on the second day. So that's going to be really, really fun. Now there is another option. Like, say you're somebody that does know how to can, and you just was like, wow, I never made strawberry jelly before. There is an option for you to take just the one class. But I do put in the description that this class is recommended for someone that has experience with water bath canning. So, so I don't want anyone to just sign up and just say, I just want to make strawberry jelly. And because that first day of the workshop, like I said, I really do get into what canning is. It's really very introductory about, what we're really doing here. So there is the option to take the one class. The one class is $30. The 2-day workshop is $50. So it's really kind of a bonus. And then while supplies last, you get a canning gift that I will send to you. And so it will typically either be, sometimes I will send a canning book, like a Boss canning book to you. Sometimes I will send like the stickers that go on the jars so that you can date your jars. So it just depends. Sometimes I'll ask ahead of time, like, do you happen to have this? They don't know why I'm asking, but I'll ask the question. And if they say no, then I'll just go ahead and order that for them and I'll get that sent out to them. So with that class, typically comes a gift, and it includes both canning, both days.
Nice. And it's very affordable. And,
Yes.
Sister Colette, I'll make sure that I have links to your website as well as your social media sites in the show notes for today. But before we finish up, talk to us about being a pescatarian for folks who are considering giving up meat, right?
Oh,
and
I'm so glad.
yeah, talk to us about that and the pescatarian lifestyle.
Thank you for mentioning that. So, in the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, has a book called How to Eat to Live. He has 2 books, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And so in that book, he talks about the fact that really no meat is good for us. Of course, us as Muslims, we don't eat pork. But the messenger also, is also letting us know that, of course, we're not going to be eating the pork, but we really should not be eating any of those meat items because they're just really not good for you. To be honest, really, the fish we should be getting away from. He tells us that vegetables are really best for us.
Right.
But he gives us, we get the mercy of Allah, if you, just eat fish, get rid of the other stuff. And so I read that book a lot, and I read it at least twice a year. And because, what happens is, I have to check myself to see where I'm at. Because there's a lot, depending on where you were when you came in the nation, maybe, and if you were brought up in it, maybe you already have this diet, but if you already had a diet of the world, you need to remind yourself, and I do, and check my diet and see how far in line am I in with what Allah revealed to us as the best way to eat. And so I'll typically read it and see where I'm at. Okay, what do I need to improve on or things like that. And so, it's been nagging me a little bit about getting rid of meat out my diet. So I was just like, okay, let me give this. I know I can do it, but it's just, I need to be obedient in this. So I was looking at the title of the book, and it says, From Allah in Person. Like, what more do you want the title to say? He's telling you that this is how to eat to live. Do you want to live?
Right.
So I was like, okay, so that's the foundation of where that comes from. Many people do it for different reasons. That was my foundation of how I got into it. And so I have an ebook actually. And so on that same website, if you go there, I have an ebook where I share my personal strategy on how I became pescatarian in 6 months or less. And so, just really quick, what I did is I just, there's 2 ways that you can do it. You can either just stop, just don't do it, just stop eating meat. And people do it. Some people do it, they're fine with that. That's how I stopped eating pork. it was funny, when I came in, I remember calling a sister, because I'm like, oh man, we ain't supposed to eat pork no more, And I remember like, okay, I got to wean myself off of this. And so I remember calling the sister at the time, and I was like, oh, I just wanted to ask, how did you wean yourself off of eating pork?
Wean, sister, did you say wean? Wean yourself off of pork?
Okay. And I will never forget this. She was training me at the time, and she also happened to be the minister's wife at the time. And so I remember her saying, so simply put, I just stopped because it's the truth.
Yes.
And I was
so simple.
And it was just that was it.
So simple.
And I was just like, oh, you just stopped because it's the truth.
That's right.
And so I just stopped because it's the truth. And I never went back again. So there is no, do you want to wean yourself off of poison?
Right,
so just stop the poison. So and it's the same really with the pescatarian. You can just stop if you would like, but you can also use what I call the embrace it method, where you just embrace it.
Nice.
You just remove one meat at a time each month. Depending on what that meat is, you still eat the way you've been eating. You just take away a meat at a time. Another thing that I like to mention also is that we want to try to get into fasting as much as we can.
Yes.
And so I don't get really too much into that in the book, but being a pescatarian, what I can say, what it's done for me is that it has given me so much more energy and clarity. I can eat a huge plate of food and jump up and just continue my to-do list,
Right.
Whereas before, when you finish eating, it's over. Like, okay, I just ate dinner. That means it's done.
Right.
Let's get somebody going to clean the kitchen.
Nap
nothing
time.
else is getting done until tomorrow.
Right,
it's just the end of your day. You're over. But the vegetables give you life, and so more vegetables on your plate, you're actually eating a living, something that was alive. That not too long ago. Meat. This meat that we're eating has been dead a long time ago. We don't know how long that meat has been dead, what the process was by the time it got to the store, by the time it got to your plate. It has no flavor. This is why we have to season it to death to give it some type of life, to make it taste like something. That all of a sudden you eat chicken that wasn't seasoned too well, you're like, this chicken needs some more seasoning.
Right.
Because it doesn't taste like anything. It has nothing, no flavor.
Right.
And so I started to realize that. And what I realized is that vegetables have their own flavors, with or without seasoning. Like you can eat a green pepper, onion, strawberry, and it has its own divine flavor.
Yes.
Of course, sometimes we add, sugars and things, but you don't have to.
Right.
So once I realized that, I'm like, we have been, we've been lied to. We don't need to be eating this meat. They make us think that the meat is the foundation, and then add a couple vegetables to it.
Exactly.
But, so you just switch that. And so, so anyone that's listening, the book is very affordable. It's a $7 book. At this time, all proceeds that come from that book are going to my fundraiser, which is our Savior's Day fundraiser. So every time you make a purchase of that book, all that money goes right to help the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in his endeavors of keeping our nation up and running.
Wonderful. I will definitely be downloading that book myself. And sister, this has been a wonderful and delightful interview. You are a delightful sister. You're a beautiful sister. You're doing a wonderful and great service to our people. And I pray that Allah God blesses you and blesses everything that you're doing.
Yes, ma'am. May Allah continue to bless you and continue to make you successful as well, sister. We want what we want for each other.
That's right, sister. That's right. I want for my sister what I want for myself.
Ma'am.
And I add a little something extra on the back of that because sometimes our people need to hear it, that I want for my sister what I want for myself, even if I don't have it yet. And I add that on there because, some of us, need a little... some of us, we don't want her to have it till I got it first, so I add that on there. Sister Colette, thank you so much for coming to the show.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nurah Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, nurahmuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@nurahspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nurah Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nurah Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.